Hey everyone, what's going on? This is a Pokemon Unite tier list. Now, I'm going to set some ground rules for the tier list, so you're at least given the context of how I'm making these decisions. This tier list is for solo queue. It is not for group play or competitive or five-mans or whatever, because in five-mans, things are wildly different because you have coordination, and there are some Pokemon whose coordination is, or at least influence in a coordinated team is significantly better than in solo queue. And there are some Pokemon that versus a coordinated team are actually pretty bad. But in solo queue, things are a little different, things are more hectic. So what you'll find is a lot of the Pokemon that are rated pretty highly here prey on the hecticness of solo queue rather than the coordinated play. I'll give you one example, and I'll start. Gengar in solo queue, in my opinion, is S+, because he preys on hecticness. He preys on people out of position. He has got one of the highest single target damage bursts. His hex reset is absolutely ridiculous. But in coordinated play, he's no more than maybe B, because people will take things like, Ninetales or Slowbro or something, and they'll find a way to lock Gengar down so that he becomes useless. But in solo queue, Gengar is S+. Now, I've got to say thanks to G2A for sponsoring the channel. There's a reference link in the description below if you fancy checking that out. But otherwise, thank you and welcome to the content. I do Pokemon Unite content just a little bit. I'm testing the waters with Pokemon Unite, but I also do Wild Rift content. If you're a Wild Rift viewer, I've got a pretty spicy video coming tomorrow. We played a lot of Tryndamere, and he's pretty good on the current patch. But anyway, back to Pokemon. I've kind of explained Gengar. Gengar is a really, really strong central. I like to call them junglers just because of MOBA experience, but he's a very strong central path speedster. He's got a pretty weak early game, but because you can get level 5 on first rotation of your clear, you can actually hit the Haunter evolution pretty quickly. And by the time that you hit level 7, if you're not behind, you can really start to snowball the game. So Gengar is super, super strong in solo queue, especially at low level solo queue. He will absolutely murder Elos like Great and Expert and even Veteran. Gengar can just control, get out of control, and his single target damage, like I've said, is pretty insane. Gengar can solo Zapdos at, if he's ahead. Gengar can solo Dreadnought. He can solo, I always forget the thing at the top, but the little thing that goes and, you know what I mean, that thing. What the hell's that thing called? Anyway, I never usually go for that. I always focus Dreadnought. Dreadnought's way more important. Irrespective, Gengar, very strong in solo queue. Next up on my list is Venusaur. So, Venusaur, I think he has more legs in group play. I think in solo queue, he's no more than a B tier. You go Sludge Bomb, you go Solo Beam, you've got a lot of damage, but it can be a little inconsistent to land, and Venusaur also needs a bit of setup to make work. I think Venusaur is good, but he's not insane. There are better damage dealers that do the same thing as Venusaur. He's a little tankier than most ranged damage dealers. He can take a bit more of a beating, but not so much so that it makes him worth to pick him over sort of Gardevoir, for instance. Gardevoir is pretty nutty. So Venusaur is solid. Like, I've won games with Venusaur. He feels okay. Mr. Mime. So, Mr. Mime is one of those picks that if you're like a one-trick Mr. Mime, he can feel really obnoxious to play against. But otherwise, I think, like, if you're playing him with, especially without a coordinated lane to play him in, he can be a little awkward. I think he's solid. I think maybe I underrate him a little bit here. I do think Mr. Mime is really solid. Because maybe a bit high. I don't know. I think there are, if you're picking, I don't know why you'd pick him over like Ninetales, for instance. I think Ninetales is absolutely nutty, and so I don't know why you'd pick Mr. Mime over Ninetales, for instance. But he's good. He's quite tanky. He's got a good lockdown. He's got a good single target lockdown. You go Psychic and Barrier. It's pretty good. But overall, I think he doesn't fit into many comps where you would rather not just have like a Snorlax or a Ninetales, right? And I think even though his Unite move is insanely good, I think in general Mr. Mime is kind of okay. And I think good Mr. Mime players can definitely make him work really well. But I don't know in solo queue whether you can have the individual impact if you've got someone in your lane that's kind of screwing you over a little bit. Snorlax. Absolutely S tier. Probably the best tank in the game, if I'm honest with you. Would put him S+, but S+ is kind of reserved for those picks that can like blow up a game by themselves. Snorlax can't do that per se because he is very much someone that plays around his team. But I think Snorlax is the best defender, the best tank in the game. With heavy slam and block, whatever it is, you've got great team presence. You can also go yawn or the one that puts people to sleep for single target lockdown. Is a good answer into Gengar, for instance. But I think in general, Snorlax is really good. Hasn't got the same level of solo carry potential as the Gengar, but Snorlax in general is a really, really strong pick. And I think if you're looking to main a tank, Snorlax is one of the best tanks to main because he can have a lot of impact in fights. He has got quite high damage. He's one of the best early camp securers in the game. So in lane, not many people can damage Snorlax in terms of the sort of damage he can deal to your neutral minions. So you can kind of absorb XP really easily with Snorlax. And so I just think that Snorlax in general is the best defender in the game, but he's not got the same solo carry potential as, like a Gengar, for instance. Gardevoir. Think she's insane. I think Gardevoir is really good. The only drawback for Gardevoir is that she's super squishy. So versus something like a good Gengar or a fed Gengar or a Zorora or a Lucario, you're going to find that Gardevoir is a little squishy and she dies pretty quickly. She is a little bit more reliant on having peel. But compared to Venusaur, her damage is insane, is a little easier to land in general. Her early game is maybe not as strong as the Bulbasaur early game, but Gardevoir is a good pick. And I think she's very, very strong right now. She's got plenty of crowd control as well, like stuns, etc., that she can throw down. So I think Gardevoir is a really, really nice pick in the current meta, and I expect to see Gardevoir played pretty consistently, if I'm honest with you. Absol. Think he's good. I think he's really good. I don't think he's quite got the same carry potential as some of the other central pathers. I think he's got super, super strong early game, especially he's got a lot of dashes, can definitely take over games really quickly. If anything, I'd probably put him right at the top of S tier because I think he is just about on that border. But, I think there are other central pathers that I'd rather have than Absol. But Absol is really, really strong. Very high damage ceiling. But that's basically what Absol provides. He's more about that pure damage burst rather than anything else. Garchomp. Garchomp is solid. I think Garchomp's really solid. Outside of his Unite move, he's a little easier to handle. And so therefore, I think Garchomp is quite reliant on his Unite move to have the big impact. Whereas, overall, I think Garchomp's a solid choice. You can't go too far wrong picking Garchomp. And I think in general, you'll find that you'll find that Garchomp will do you and service you really well. He's just a solid bruisery type Pokemon. And I think, his Unite move is insanely strong, but outside of his Unite move is kind of, I don't know. Lucario. If anything, I'd put Lucario above Gengar. Lucario is busted. This Pokemon is really crazy. Lucarios have got some of the biggest single target bursts in the game. They can steal objectives so easily with Power Up Punch. They've got loads of dashes. If you take Bone Dash and whatever it's called, Bone Smash, I don't know what the fuck it's called. And then you also take the Power Up Punch. You've got so many dashes in your kit, as well as also having eject button. He's got so much mobility and so much damage. Lucario is one of the best Pokemon in the game. Hands down, one of the best Pokemon in the game. Crustle. I like Crustle. I like my boy Crustle. I think he's solid. He's not as tanky as Snorlax. He sacrifices some of his defensive resistances if you take Rock Smash or whatever it is, the Shell Smash. And X Scissors is or Scissor X is kind of a little bit more inconsistent than just having Heavy Slam from Snorlax. But he's got a really good Unite move. It's very difficult to ignore him during Unite move if you also slap on Shell Smash. And he does a lot of damage in that period. But again, like Garchomp, I think he's very Unite move reliant. I've won a lot of games at Zapdos by just having Crustle's Unite move up. So just bear that in mind. When he's got his Unite move up, he is super strong. But again, before that, without Unite move, he's a little squishier than most of the defenders, and it maybe isn't as strong as some of the other choices that you could have in your defender role. Greninja. I think Greninja's really good. I think he's maybe one of the more underrated picks. He's got a lot of DPS, and I think Greninja is a great solid choice as a ranged DPS choice. No, do you know what? Top of A. I think Greninja's worse than some of the other things that I would have put in S. Speaking of which, Cinderace, probably the best ranged auto attack damage dealer in the game. Pretty weak early game, but once you get him past level 9, he's super strong and can really start to take over games. So I think Cinderace is just a better Greninja, in my opinion. This bird thing. What the hell is this bird thing called? Talonflame? I'm Googling it. 1 second. Yeah, it's called Talonflame. This bird sucks. I don't know. Maybe he doesn't suck, but I just almost see no one ever use him. And I feel like you generally play it in the speedster role, and there is just 10 times better options in the speedster role. I think there are just lots and lots of better options in the speedster role. And so I think in general, he's not the best choice in the world. Speaking of great speedsters, Zeraora. Zeraora is one of those Pokemon that can just take over games. These three in the top, like these three Pokemon right here, they can take over games by themselves in solo queue. They're just so good in that respect. And I think, they're all like really insane individual speedster picks. I just don't think I'd never seen a Talonflame do the same thing. Charizard. Solid A tier all-rounder, similar to Garchomp. They had to nerf his Seismic Slam because it was doing too much damage, but he's still a great all-rounder to have in your team. It takes a little while to scale up, again, like some of these other poor early game Pokemon. Does need the evolutions, does need the levels, but, I think Charizard's a solid all-rounder. Camerant. I think Camerant is like... It's difficult. A really good Camerant player can like take over because they've just got an obnoxious amount of burst damage. But would I put him S tier? Once you've used your 2 skills, if you miss them, you've got nothing left, and his Unite move's a bit easy to dodge. You have to kind of play into his Unite move. Like the enemy team kind of has to play into the Unite move. It's not very proactive. It's more of a defensive Unite move. So I think in general he's slightly weaker than some of the choices in S tier, but he's definitely super good if you can play him well. And I'll add that caveat. I think Cramorant is super good if you can play him well. Yeah. Elvigos. The problem with Elvigos is it's like you can't really carry games, but he's super useful. You can't really carry games on Elvigos, but he's super useful. Maybe he's like up a lower end of 80. I think he's probably the best support in the game to have, but he's not exactly like one of those supports that's going to carry the game like by themselves. So Elvigos, I think, is solid. Probably better than Mr. Mime in general as a support pick. Pikachu. Yeah, Pikachu is actually quite obnoxious. One of the best lane damage carries in the game. Again, there are a lot of like really solid Pokemon, as you can see here. Like Pikachu's just super solid. I think Pikachu's like a really, really solid laner. Got very, very strong laning presence in the early game. Very difficult to play against him. So I think Pikachu's just in general just a good pick. He's going to serve you well. He's a great beginner friendly pick as well, and it got great laning presence. So I think Pikachu in that regard is pretty solid. Ninetales. I think Ninetales is insane. Like half support, half ranged carry. But if you go like Glacial and then Aurora Veil, like, oh my god, the damage output that you've got and the control that you've got in team fights is super good. And Ninetales' ultimate is great at controlling spaces as well. I think Ninetales can't quite solo carry, but very much borderline S+ for me. I think, you can't go wrong with having a Ninetales in almost every game that you play, if I'm honest with you. Wigglytuff. Wigglytuff. Probably worse than Crustle and Snorlax. I think there are some people that swear by Wigglytuff, but I'm just not the biggest fan. I don't think Wigglytuff is insane. But I think Wigglytuff may end up... I think maybe most people... I myself might even underrate Wigglytuff slightly, but I think Wigglytuff is maybe not as good as some of the other defenders in the game, and I don't think Wigglytuff is like... So I probably should have explained... I'll edit it in. I'll explain what these tiers mean at the end. Slowbro. Slowbro is, again, one of those, like, defenders that I think he's like a specific counter pick into things. Like, if you want to lock down one of these particular champions, like Slowbro's got 2 ways of doing that, and it's a really good counter to individual carries. But you don't have much damage, really, and you aren't as tanky as, like, Crustle and Snorlax, and maybe not even as tanky as Wigglytuff. So you die pretty quickly, honestly, on Slowbro. You're there to facilitate your team, and Surf is a great peeling tool, so you're really good. A well-placed Surf can keep things like your Gardevoir and your Cinderace alive. But you've got, like, Telekinesis, and then you have your ultimate. I don't know, it's just, yeah. Where did I get to, guys? Who was I talking about? Ninetales, or was I talking about Cramorant? Was it Ninetales? I don't know. Sorry, basically my food got here, and I've just now taken a half an hour break from recording this and went to eat food. Yeah, but Ninetales I think is super good. I don't know if I was talking about Ninetales, but essentially Ninetales is awesome. So yeah, I like Ninetales. Cool. Or was it Pikachu? I don't know. This is where we are with the tier list. Machamp. I think Machamp's really good. I think he's better than a lot of the champions here in A tier. But I think in general he takes quite a few levels to come online. But I think Machamp is like super strong. In fact, I'd probably rate him as slightly higher than these two. I think Machamp's got insane carry potential. And I think he's got a lot of damage. He's got a huge amount of CC. I think Machamp is a super, super strong champion Pokemon. So I think Machamp's great. And I think he's a very strong carry potential in solo queue. So this is my tier list. Maybe I've underrated this thing, but I just never see it. It's really difficult to rate this guy, and I probably underrated him massively, but I just never see Talonflame. He just doesn't feel very impactful compared to a lot of the other Pokemon. I've seen more Wigglytuff than Talonflame. Maybe Talonflame's good. Maybe he's actually good, but I just don't see him very often. And I know he's just outclassed by the rest of the speedsters in this list. So that's why I don't really see Talonflame very often. But hey, look, there we go. That is the Pokemon tier list. That's my current thoughts on where things are. Enjoy. And yeah, enjoy playing Pokemon Unite. I'm really enjoying playing Pokemon Unite. So enjoy playing it, and hopefully catch you in some games. See you soon.